All right, welcome in K-State Online. Mason Voth, KSU fan here, ready to rock and roll as K-State takes down Colorado on this Sunday. About said Saturday, not a Sunday. Last Sunday game of the year that you'll have to worry about for K-State and what they've got going on, but they get back in the win column. They're able to take down Colorado today, 65-56, the final score. K-State able to do that after some struggles against inferior opponents, or what should have been inferior opponents the last couple of times out. They take care of a really bad Colorado team. And basically the way that I would summarize this is that K-State's not good, but Colorado flat sucks. They did a lot of things today that not just bad teams do, but really crappy ones do. And that's more of the reason why K-State was able to win today. I do think, you need to at least credit and give some props to how they came out. It seemed focused. K-State didn't come out and beat themselves today. They beat themselves early enough in those games against Arizona State and UCF to make the game difficult. The game was never difficult for K-State today.
No, the real key was the defense for K-State holding Colorado, their worst offensive efficiency this season. So, you never know in these games when both teams are kind of playing out the string, hoping to get to the Kansas City and do damage there. That's really your only hope of making the tournament. But you hold them to their worst efficiency of the season. You hold their best player and leading scorer to 0 points. Julian Hammond didn't score in the game, so that was pretty important to me. You win on turnovers. You knew Colorado was not a good team at taking care of the ball or forcing turnovers, and you win turnover margin, you win turnover rate, and you outscore them 20-5 off turnovers. So things that K-State needed to do, they did well. I mean, you look at it, if you would have told me before the game that Colorado would shoot 20% better from two, because K-State only made 35% from two, I would have said we have another ugly loss. K-State was 1-10 with 48% from two this season or worse, and they hadn't won a game this shooting this bad. This was their worst 2-point game of the year. But despite that, they found a way to win, mainly because they played pretty good defense and really controlled the whole game. You leave 38 minutes, and even though it was sloppy at the end, Colorado got within 8. They never really threatened.
Yeah, it was never one of those that you were overly worried about if you were K-State, although when Colorado had it a little bit closer than maybe it deserved to be at the end, you thought to yourself, I've seen this team do some dumb things this year, so I won't officially rule it out, but K-State really took care of them today, and a lot of it had to do with how good David Gasson was. 21 points, 8 boards for him. And then you look, the rest of the numbers aren't anything overly exciting or impressive. I mean, when I was putting this together at the end, building the graphic out, and I see K-State was 34% from the field today, I was like, you don't win many games when you shoot 34% from the field, but to what you're talking about, K-State was better in the right areas, and they just didn't beat themselves. You see the turnover numbers there. K-State had 20 points off turnovers. Colorado only had 5. And then you had good enough games from Gasson and Hazen to make up everything else that struggled. Because Doug McDaniel, he took 17 shots today, and that's concerning that the efficiency's down. He's not hitting some of those shots closer to the basket that he had been banking in when things were going right. And then you just didn't get a whole lot from anybody else. I'll bring it up now, but Ron pointed out that Max had another bad game today. He had a couple of shots that fell that you're like, okay, that's nice, but he just didn't produce. That's kind of the player that he is, though. He is going to have the ups and downs with his game, and I think that's why when I think about what the future looks like for K-State, you want Max Jones back, but you either need to get a lot better in certain positions in your starting 5, or Max is more of an ideal, really good 6th guy coming off the bench.
Yeah, I agree. Max is a good piece to have just because he's got a lot of experience now playing college basketball and has had some pretty good stretches for K-State this season. This is now, I think, the 3rd poor game of his last 4. 9 points, 2 boards, 2 assists. Not awful, but only 2 of 8 from the floor. He really tried to attack the basket and was not able to get foul calls or makes at the rim. You talked about Doug, 4-17 and 22% on twos. That's a rough outing. shooting the ball. He did make a couple threes. He had missed his last 8, I believe, in the last 2 ball games. So it was nice to see him make a couple threes. He did have 7 assists with only 2 turnovers and 3 steals. So he did some nice things distributing and moving the ball around. He has to be more efficient. 0.7 efficiency, that's just not very good from the point guard. But he did a few nice things, and he was part of the defense that really held Hammond in check and helped K-State hold Colorado to their worst efficiency this season.
Yeah, the defense was good enough. It didn't seem like Colorado got a ton. I mean, they were given some looks from 3, but I'm not going to overreact and try to say that, oh, the game should have been closer if those went in. They didn't. K-State did what they needed to do throughout the game, and it's not – Colorado's been a bad team all season. So it's not like you can look at it and say, well, those would normally fall. I mean, Colorado's shooting under 33% from 3 as a team this year. They're not very good. You can leave them, and none of them seem like overly great looks to me. But on the topic of defense, Ron says Buddy Rich has less defensive ability than my 8-year-old nephew. No idea on defense. Yeah, Ron, I would concur with that. I think, and this kind of goes against what Ron says the other way, because he was giving some praise to Ugo. I still didn't like what I saw from Ugo today. I know that there were a handful of people that thought that it was better. It was. It still didn't look like anything special to me with what he did. But I think those 2 guys are constantly lost and confused on what needs to happen throughout the course of the game. And I know Garrett asked if we know why Buddy's playing again. Not really. I mean, the real answer, I think, would be they need bodies, and they're ailing right now. The season's getting late. You don't have Coleman Hawkins. You got to try some. I mean, Taj Manning played today for the first time since the blowout win over Oklahoma State. So they're just looking for anything, throwing guys out there. We talked about it after the UCF game. There really, to me, didn't seem much of a reason to play Buddy Rich, and we saw more of it today. He just doesn't do anything to help you win a game. And some of the numbers that he can get at times, they're pretty hollow when you watch how he ends up playing. But those 2 guys didn't do anything to change my opinion of them moving forward today.
Yeah, they're role players. I think Ugo's got more potential than Buddy to be a legit 4-5. He did get some rebounds today, blocked a few shots. I thought he was more energetic, but he still struggles compared to what the expectation was for him coming into the season, I think. Buddy's, he was kind of an energy guy a little bit today and made a few shots. Had one of the most ferocious missed dunks I've seen in a long time as well. Had 4 fouls in like 9 minutes at one point when he was playing. So if you can, you got to be on the same page with guys like that if you're going to bring him back. So if you're talking about returning players like that, you got to be on the same page with them. But I don't think you can expect either one to be a starter next year. You got to go find 2 portal starters to be post players for you, I think, moving forward, and then find that mix and match at the perimeter, who you're going to keep, who you can bring back, and then you probably got to go get the guy that can push for a starting spot in those 3 perimeter spots. So that's the way I see it. I think there were some good things from those 2 big guys today, but they're still got a long ways to go.
Yeah, you're just in a situation where the most telling thing to me is in the topic of Ugonna and Yinso. You brought him in because you didn't think anything of his offensive game as it sat right now. That's the area where you hope and you go, okay, he's a little raw. Maybe we can develop that. And if you do, then you've got a legit player on your hands. But his defensive ability has fallen off mightily. His first 2 seasons at Kentucky, he didn't play a ton in that first year, the year that K-State beat Kentucky in the second round of the NCAA tournament. But he played a lot last year. And was good with his blocking ability. Block rate was 15.9% his first year in the limited minutes that he got, 15.3 last year. This year it's dipped down to 8.9. It'll be less than that after you calculate the stats today because he once again didn't have any. and he never really seems to be in position to help you make plays on defense. And I think a lot of the things that or a lot of the time that we've seen him end up with higher rebound games, I think it's been dumb luck. Balls bounce your way. Sometimes they bounce your way, sometimes they don't. Like I think of late in the game there, David Gasson was under the basket a lot, and the ball never once bounced off the rim towards where he was. It bounced to C.J. Jones or Buddy Rich, something like that. So I don't see it. Somebody else might. It may work out down the road, as we have seen with players like Selton Miguel or whoever else you want to throw out and check in on to see what they're doing at their most recent stop. But I don't see it being productive for him at K-State, because he's not enough of a difference maker to think you need to keep him around, especially in the NIL era, and when obviously keeping guys in a locker room happy is pretty important to your success. That's kind of where, K-State this year, when they got to finally rolling, it felt like that was the peak happiness for this season for everybody, and just like the harmony of the team. Now you're in a situation where it kind of got out of whack again. I think you want to have everybody kind of pulling in the right direction. I don't know that you can keep a guy like that happy when you brought him in this year with the expectation he was going to play more than he did. Like, I think based on what it probably took to land him, he and K-State both thought he was going to do more for him this season, and he's just not capable of it. So I didn't see anything to turn my mind around on that. I will ask you this, Fan, because nobody really cares about the actual ins and outs of these games right now because they don't really matter. But it's more big picture. Anybody out there for Colorado today that you say, hey, when they go in the portal after this year, do you want any of them?
Well, you brought up Bad Got Dak would be a potential post player that I think the kind of guy K-State should probably look to try to go find. And if they could get him to come back to the Midwest, he is from Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska, I believe. So if you could go get a guy like that to come home, he's a guy that I think has a lot of potential, and probably what we thought Ugo would be. Like that, I think that's the kind of guy we thought Ugo would be, but he's not quite there yet. But you see a guy like Dak, he's a really solid post player that has a lot of potential, very long and stretchy, and has several years left as well. So that's the kind of guy you do want to get, and I think absolutely K-State's going to need to go get in the offseason through the portal.
Yeah, I look around and I think about just where K-State's going to have to go in their portal hunting this year. I'll be interested to see how it plays out. I think those first couple of days and weeks will be telling, and how it's going to set the stage for them moving forward, and what we can kind of expect from the trajectory of this offseason. Because as it stands right now, we probably look at it and think that Hazen will be back. Doug, we think, was probably trending in that direction. And then if you get the waiver for Max that you would probably like, I mean, those three I don't think are good enough to be your starters at the 1, 2, 3 next year. I think you have to improve there somewhere. And then, like you said, you're going to need somebody like a Bengot Dak, because David Gasson is not going to be back next season. I mean, how badly is K-State going to miss him? And that kind of ties into what Ridge says about what's scary is, how does K-State replace the production from Coleman and Dave? It isn't going to come from the players on the bench. Absolutely right there. How do you see that playing out with no David Gasson next year? Because he's turned into a phenomenal player for K-State this season, outside of the really bad stretch he just put together where he didn't have his best.
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of I think you got to go find 2 post players and 1 perimeter player that can push to be in your top 6 or 7 of your rotation, and then the returners got to get better. I mean, if you return Doug, Hausen, and then you can get Max back as well, those 3 all have to get better and improve. Doug, we've seen the peak of Doug during that winning streak, and he was really good and efficient, but we're also seeing him kind of slide back to what we saw a lot in the early of the season. I think his defense is better. I think he's playing better defense, but he can't have efficiencies of 0.7, 0.8 and K-State be a very good team next year. That's just not going to happen. Your point guard's got to be 1 or better, 1 to 1.1 type of efficiency numbers. The way I look at it, especially with the kind of usage that he's going to have. So that combination, you probably aren't going to just replace what David has done this year. He's been, he's probably the only guy K-State has playing at all Big 12 level, at least honorable mention. After that, you got to go find another guy that could come in and play right away, though.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, and this is, I think, that the benefit of this offseason, because I've got one here that I want to point out from Ron. He says, if Ugo won't be better with minutes and Max is only a role player, then what the heck are we going to build around? Sounds like a new 10 again. I'm out. I don't think it'll be a new 10, but it's going to probably need to be a new 3 guys that play a lot of minutes for you. And then there will be 2 or 3 others that come along that you'll really, kind of get to know in some fashion or another. And those numbers could build depending on what other guys choose. Like you'll have a guy like CJ Jones that I think of that will have to probably decide, what is my role for this team next year? What could I do for another team at, whatever level it may end up being? Because those are kind of the wild cards in all of this. The question about what about by fall for next year? I think that they're hoping, because they're going to try and get the red shirt for him. I think the hope is that they will kind of develop him and turn him into essentially kind of what Dak is for Colorado. Like, they're similar size in what they do. Obviously, he was thought highly of coming out of high school as a McDonald's All-American. So I think that's the hope. And I think maybe if you want to have some kind of positive outlook on it, you say it's a benefit that they were able to get him to sit most of the season, and they think they'll get the red shirt. So number one, they wanted to put in the time to actually develop him. And then number two, he was accepting of being able to do that, because there are a lot of other guys on this team this year that I really question why they weren't redshirting or what the point of them actually playing was. So I think that would kind of be the hope for him, but he's just going to be one of those unknowns. Same for a guy like David Castillo. If he comes back next year, that's fine, but like, you don't need to bend over backwards to try and keep a guy like that in his freshman year. I'm not asking for him to give you the world, but it would have been nice to have seen at least him do one thing this year that you go, I'd like to see that develop. He hasn't even shot the ball that well this season. He knocked down a 3 today, but it still wasn't anything overwhelming to me. He made some really bad decisions. Like, he's struggling right now, and it's going to take some time there. So it's a matter of if he's patient enough for it, and if he's going to be able to build off this, use it to take a leap moving forward next year. So one of the other things that I'll ask you about in terms of personnel, as you look at it right now, and we talk about who's kind of coming back and everything, or might be, where do you feel in your, I guess, confidence for each of the main contributors that would be back next year that we would think of? So that'd be Doug, Hazen, probably Max Jones, and then you can throw anybody else in there, because as much as, the last home game here, I was disappointed by what we saw out of Max Jones, because he just didn't rise up to it. He did it against UCF. He bounced back. Doug's shooting is kind of reverting back to a concerning point, a volume thing. And I'm not terribly worried about it, because they're missing a key piece. He probably feels like he has to do more. He's still putting up big assist numbers. But where do you sit and how you feel like those guys can contribute to a team next year that it's not just about putting up the numbers, it's about being a part of a team that can get to the NCAA tournament again?
Yeah, that's a good question and good to ponder. I think if you look at the perimeter pieces, it's those 3 having a vision for how they can move this program forward. I think that's what you got to sell to those 3, that they can be the piece that moves this program forward and back to the NCAA tournament. There's questions of why would those guys stay. That's on the staff. I mean, you got to sell the vision of what those guys can be. They've seen a taste of it in that 6-game winning streak of what they could be. Granted, with 2 of those players are going to be gone next year, but still, you look at the thing about, we've had the continuity discussion a bunch, and continuity just for continuity and continuity of bad players is not good. But there's some value in it. And I see it as this: if you have guys coming back that are bought in to the coaching staff, are extensions of the coaching staff, and then can sell that vision for the program to the rest of the new guys that are coming in, then you have continuity that can work. And I think that's what you're trying to sell to those guys and try to get those bought in on. You know, the way I look at it is this too. The only guy of K-State's top 6 that was a returner this year was David Gasson. All 5 of the other guys were brand new players. Next year, you have the opportunity to return 3 of your top 6 or 4 of your top 6 if you want to throw C.J. Jones in that mix for this season. Now, you still got to get better. You probably don't want those 4 to be in your top 6 next year, but it would be nice to have 4 of your top 6 back and then add 3 guys that are better than at least 1 or 2 of those guys. And then you're talking about a team that can make the NCAA tournament. That's the way I would look at it.
Yeah. Garrett says, why would Brendan and Doug come back next year? The team has looked so bad sometimes against bad teams. What's stopping them from going to a better basketball program? And then Ron, if everyone is almost out, why are we so sure Brendan and Doug will come back for another year of this? I don't think everyone is almost out. I think that they bring back a majority of the guys that have the option to come back next year, or of the guys that you would at least hint at saying, hey, we want you back. So, I think that they're going to have the opportunity there. I just think that there are some guys that are surefire that if I was making decisions, I would make sure that they knew that the door was open and that I'm not expecting much from them next year, like Ugo, like Buddy. I just don't see any benefit to it, especially, I think there's a rumored price tag that was a little hefty with Ugonna and Yenso, that he's clearly just not worth that. And I get that he had maybe some better numbers today in the box score for what people look at. So, I mean, he ends up with 6 boards and 3 blocks today. I still have my eyes. He's going to do nothing on offense for you. He's lost a lot. I don't see any benefit from it. And you can call me an idiot if you think that me saying that Ugonna and Yenso is not a difference maker in a basketball game is wrong. That's fine. You can have your opinion, but from what I've seen on the court, I just don't think it's a benefit to bring him back. But I expect these guys to come back, number one, because I think they have bought in. I think they like the situation that they're in now. And just because the team has been not very good doesn't mean players won't come back. I mean, David Gasson came back after last year, and that's a guy that, very similar season last year to this year, and he still decided to come back. It's because he liked the staff, and I think he liked the role opportunity that he was going to have. The same type of thing can happen for those guys, and I think most of them will look at it. It's just going to come down to, number one, this staff obviously last year was very open to kind of shooing guys out the door, or at least saying, hey, we think we're going to bring something better than you in, so just be prepared for that. You can come back, but it may not work out. It's happened 2 years in a row. They did it to Ish Massoud after the first year. And it could be said that I think a lot of people both times have looked at it and gone ahead and said, you know what? It would have been nice if you had Ish Massoud on last year's team. Would have gave you another offensive option, somebody that could hit some shots. It would have been nice if you had Cam Carter or Arthur Kaluma on this year's team. It's tough to say that, though, because, the staff didn't think Achor would come in and only play, 9 games and then peace out after the St. John's game. So, it's a little bit of a trickier game with that. But in hindsight, you probably would have liked to have had one or both of those guys. But that doesn't mean that you would have been able to land other guys, or all this other stuff ends up working out. So I think that there's reason to believe that a lot of these guys are happy now and are going to see the opportunity. They had that good stretch. They're going to realize, hey, if we can just jump out of the gates right, we're going to be a better team next year. They can see the vision. They can feel it. And those are 2 guys that, next year's or last year of eligibility, I don't know if they're looking at it saying, I want to start over my final year and go to a third school in 4 years. I think a guy like Brendan Hazen, it would be a little easier to do that because he's got a skill that can get him on the floor immediately, and it's not hard to integrate him into an offense. But like Doug McDaniel would be looking at having to run a whole new offense, get accustomed to new teammates, and so much of his game is based off what other guys do. And then everybody else is just kind of like, I think that they'll have the opportunity. I think Max Jones, like, this has probably been the best basketball year of his life. So I don't know why he would look for something different in his last year of eligibility if he were to get it back. Mention of Tyreek Smith as well. Yeah, I think you're hoping that he'll come in and he'll be the guy that can give you a little bit of a defensive burst. Not to the same level of what they were expecting Ugo to bring you, where like when you brought Ugo in, you thought you were going to get a lot more 3-block games from him. And I'm even having a hard time thinking that he had 3 blocks today. I know that's what the box score says, but didn't feel like it. He may have gotten credited with some friendly scorekeeping, but he's going to come in, be a little bit more physical. You hope he can go get some more rebounds and then have the ability to kind of finish when you're asking him to do it. But he's not going to be like a focal point next year. K-State's a bad basketball team next year if Tyreek Smith is playing more than 20 minutes a game for him.
Yeah, I think Tyreek Smith's a nice part, and he could be in your top 8 probably. I like that he's got 95 games of Big 12 play under his belt, and then he played another 30 at SMU last year. So you got a guy with experience, but he's never played more than 19 minutes on average per game in a season, and that was at SMU last year. He's never played more than 16 minutes a game in the Big 12. So he's going to be a guy that can come give you 17 to 20 minutes a game, and the experience level he has. Plus, you know, he played for Uric Malagi at Texas Tech, so that's where that connection I think came from. So you have a little bit of a connection with him and a familiarity with him, so that helps. I mean that helps. Plus, he's been here this semester and he's practicing with the team. That helps. So that's not quite continuity because he hasn't played this year, but it's continuity in knowing what's going on with this program. So I think that will be a nice piece. But I agree with you, Mason. You got to bring in 2 guys that start over him or you're in trouble. And I don't know, and that's the issue with the bigs they have in the program right now. I don't know that they have anyone that will be a starter to fill 2 spots. So that's what they got to go find. They probably have to find 2 starters unless they're going to play 4 guards or something like that next year.
Yeah, or at least, you know, kind of do what they did in year 1 of Tang, where you go out and you find some bigs that you at least trust to be on the floor. Like, it's crazy to me to go back and look at some of those games and think that Bebe Igiola he started the game against KU and Bramlage, or like he was playing legit minutes in the Sweet 16 against Michigan State. Like, that's just so wild to me, but they trusted him. And while there were things that he certainly couldn't do, I never felt like he ultimately was, you know, night in, night out, kind of killing you with what you were doing on the floor. So they're probably going to have to fill in with a lot more of that next year, guys that they trust to be cultural and program fits that they think can come in and give them at least enough minutes, and then hope that you have the high end, which you're hoping that Doug will be that right now. Hazen, when right, is obviously that on the high end offensively. They need to find another guy that can be a true night in, night out, big time player in the offense. Ideally, he would probably be at least 6'7", too, with what he can do. So that's probably the big thing. And then, yeah, you're going to need at least one player that, to me, is 6'9", that can be good for you. And those are very specific things to look for, and those are also 2 very highly sought after things in the portal. It's point guards. It's basically a 3 or a 4 hybrid that can score the basketball night in, night out, and it's a big that isn't going to get you killed out there. And those are hard things to find because the first 2 are hot commodities, and the skills don't necessarily always translate. And then the last one, there are very few of those guys in basketball in general, because most of the big guys in basketball that have the height to play basketball don't really ever have the skills to play basketball. They're just, hey, you're big, come play basketball. Let's figure it out along the way. That's why we talk so much about these guys being raw. Another question, why would a guy like Manning even want to stay? No future, although Tank said at one time he would be all Big 12. Yeah, that's certainly not going to be the case now. I think Taj Manning's a guy that you look at, not to the same level of, you know, Doug or Hazen or these others, but he's somebody that is comfortable with the program. I think he likes being here. And for like Jerome Tang and the staff and the team, like, he's a helpful guy to have around, a guy that you trust, isn't going to cause trouble for you, and I think probably gives them exactly what they ask for in practice every day. So, it was good for Taj Manning to be able to get minutes today, because guys like that do deserve a reward every once in a while. And obviously, when you're not good enough as a team, it's tough to get those moments for guys. So that's good for Taj Manning. Garrett says to me, CJ Jones has done enough this year to keep him on the team next year. I agree, but that's just one of those guys where I don't think they're showing him the door. I think he's going to be one that I'd put in that category of making a decision on what he wants his role in basketball to look like moving forward. Because that's what some of this comes down to for guys. Like, yeah, I'd be somebody that I would be questioning why a guy would want to go play at a lower level. But you can also understand why those guys would decide, it's a lot more fun to play 30 minutes a night and have the opportunity to average 15 points a game and do all that. That's just not what CJ Jones's role is going to be. But he's not one that you, like last year, saying, there's the door, walk on through it, we don't need you. If he wants to come back, you bring CJ Jones back. And that's the one benefit right now, is that you do have a lot of guys that there's no reason to force them out of the program. But you're just going to have to replace the scholarships that are opening up with guys that are a little bit more talented, and see how that ends up working out. George says, do we swing big in the transfer portal and see what hits if most people come back? Yeah, I think that's the plan there. Is you're going to bring a lot of guys back, and you'll probably have at least one really big swing, but I would hope that this coaching staff has kind of learned some of their wrongs over the last 2 off seasons and decided that they need to bring things back to reality a little bit and get I always say, go find somebody that fits what you're trying to do culturally and buys in immediately. And then they need to have at least one really good Big 12 ready skill that you need to help your team, and then build everything out from that. And that's what the first team under Jerome Tang had.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, that's the biggest thing I think that the staff has struggled with the last 2 seasons is getting that buy-in the whole season and keeping it the whole season, and really getting guys to fit the roles that they have for them. They did the perfect job, excellent job in year 1. In year 2 and year 3 have been struggles. And I think each year is a little bit different. I think last year you had probably your top 3 were probably all 3 good enough players to carry a team to the NCAA tournament, but there were issues during the season that didn't make that happen. This year, I think you really swung and missed with the portal, trying to spin big, because you had kind of this 1-year window where the NIL was really full-blown, no controls, no windows, no boundaries, no bracket on it. Next year, in theory, that changes with the new $20.5 million budget that each school is going to get to spend on NIL directly. It's not from collectives. NIL money is supposed to be reined in a little bit as far as being evaluated for, is that really worth that, what that NIL is? Now, we'll see what happens with that if it goes to court. But next year, the buyout, the payout is going to be different than it was this year. It's just going to be a different situation. And teams will adjust, and I think K-State could benefit from that if there are some boundaries, because I think Tang is more of a program builder than this swing and miss at trying to buy a team, and obviously it didn't work this year because it just hasn't been the season we expected.
Yeah, I think Jerome Tang, I think he can be successful in this era of college basketball, but as we saw with how they built it at Baylor was far more successful in the old era of college basketball than they have been since the portal and NIL really took off. And that's the thing that I always say, like, NIL was a thing that first year that Jerome Tang was here. But you think after that NCAA tournament, like Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson, their college careers were done, and they were still going out and doing NIL things that were probably netting them no more than like $1,000. And it changed so fast within the next 6 months to where now it's full blown. You're not doing jack for us to promote a product, to do like anything. We're just giving you $2 million to come play college basketball. And that you're just inevitably going to get more problems that way when guys are and this is not like I said $2 million. This is not on Coleman Hawkins, because I really don't think Coleman's been a huge problem with this. I just think he wasn't good enough in what his role was this season, or he didn't elevate the way that they thought he might. But you're going to get more guys that are probably, whether it's intentional or not, doing things in a more selfish way. So it would have been better for Jerome Tang if he had been in the old era where it was just like, you like me as a person, here's what we want to do as a basketball team, and the money is not a part of it unless, it's the occasional under the table thing that all the good programs had going on. It's just one of those. Buddy Rich played again today. Levi says, I don't believe that Tang does stuff on a whim. Buddy did something to put himself on the court. He has potential. He might have potential. I don't think it's at K-State. Again, he's another one of those guys that I just don't see it whenever he's on the floor. Yeah, he can every once in a while have some awesome dunks, but even his awesome dunk didn't go through the hole today. He did do something to put himself back on the court, kind of. I think he probably had a little bit of an attitude adjustment and started making strides in that way. I still don't think that Jerome Tang should have gone back to him playing. I think that sets a bad example for the team moving forward, because it seemed like he was done with his minutes. But we also can't deny that one of the major things that happened was Coleman Hawkins got hurt and couldn't play. And in addition to that, Moby Ike Garuka wasn't available today either. Like, two guys that are in a situation that make it more likely for Buddy Rich to get on the floor. They are ailing right now. So it's been 2 years. There's nothing going on there. And he may go on to have, a nice career somewhere else, but I just don't think it makes sense at K-State for the Buddy Rich side of things. So we'll see on how that goes. Want to bring this up from Ridge. He says, here's a positive. I'd rather be in our situation at KSU than KU's situation. Yeah, absolutely not. Look, I obviously went to K-State. I love K-State. I don't think K-State is in a bad situation by any means. They got problems to get fixed. It would be asinine to suggest that you would rather have K-State's situation than KU's. I just think the perennial powers, even in this changing era, while it may be a little bit tougher on them, and they have to be a little bit more competitive in certain areas that they've never had to be competitive in the past, I don't think it's still easier for them. They still have some built-in advantages when you have Kentucky or Kansas or Duke or Carolina across your chest. And those are also going to have deeper pocketbooks in the basketball world than what others do, because so many of the other schools, even if they don't have the reality of winning a national championship in football is always going to be king at K-State. Like, there's always going to be more money poured in to football at K-State from a donor perspective and all the things that you need to succeed. So I wouldn't, and while, Bill Self has had a down year, it's not been good for him. I think he's created a pretty flawed roster. I've used the term, he let Hunter Dickinson and DeJuan Harris kind of hijack the roster in terms of those guys being focal points of your offense and some of the other things they've done. It would probably take a little bit more than one really bad year, really bad, for them to make me think that he can't get that thing figured out. So, yeah, I would not take K-State's situation over KU, especially because KU's got the number 2 player in the class coming next year. So they are going to get back to kind of being in that territory where you bring in a guy that for the most part is likely an automatic difference maker. I mean, Cooper Flagg came in. He was an automatic difference maker at Duke this year. Same type of thing probably plays out there. A couple of things to hit on here. The Big 12 tournament, this is what the bracket would look like with the way the standings are set with just 2 games left to play. I know that there were some questions in there about Coleman Hawkins' health, and that's what Jay Schroed asked. What are you hearing about Hawkins returning? Drew gave us a nice little update there. He said, sounds like there's a chance for Coleman to come back for the Big 12 tournament at least. Moby's injury isn't long-term either. Coleman, the injury, that was kind of what I had heard, and I think a lot of us had heard, is that there would be the possibility that he would come back at the end of the year when there was maybe still some stakes attached, where it was probably worth giving it a go. The injury timeline would make that a possibility. So I think we probably, even if it's in a limited way, I bet we probably see Coleman Hawkins in uniform in Kansas City. The real question would be, as it sets up right now, K-State would be the 9 seed playing at 2 o'clock on Tuesday against Colorado. Would you even play Coleman Hawkins in that game and then say, okay, we're going to give you another game to rest up, and then we would need you against Baylor, and then obviously the behemoth of Houston that would be waiting right there for you. So we'll see how that ends up working out. And Drew also adds that Tang said Coleman wants to come back and play. He's made that clear. So we'll see how that ends up working out. Looking at that draw currently, Fan, what do you think of how it would set up for K-State?
I like the second round matchup. Should you get by Colorado, I think that Colorado's not a very good team. Baylor's very beatable. Baylor's been winning pretty badly as this season has progressed. That's a team you could beat. And then Houston, they've beat K-State by a collective 40-some points the last 2 seasons. So that one does not look great. But, surely when we played Houston this year, that was a pretty awful performance by K-State, probably our worst game of the season. So I think they can play better than that, especially if Hawkins is able to play. So, that's as good a draw as you're going to get, probably looking at the field. So that wouldn't be a bad one at all. So you just take your chances and see if you can go get some wins there.
Yeah, I think the first 2 games are totally fine. You can win those, and you can win them fairly easily relative to what we're talking about. Houston having to probably beat. Well, you have to beat Houston, Iowa State, or BYU, 2 of those 3 teams. That's what makes it difficult. You would rather be in that bottom half of the bracket where K-State was entering today, because you can beat all of those teams down there. Either you have already beat all of those teams, or you look at it and say, okay, Utah, you were in the game, it was close. UCF, you were in the game, it was close. Texas Tech, you were in the game, it was close. Same for TCU. You beat West Virginia, you beat you beat Kansas, you beat Arizona. Like, that's where you want to be. Whereas Houston, Iowa State, and BYU, they seem like the tough teams right now. BYU less so, but Houston, Iowa State up there are going to be tricky for anybody to beat. Although I will say, you look at it. No 1 seed in the history of the Big 12 tournament, not named Kansas, has actually ever won the Big 12 tournament. So Houston's going to have to try and get over the hump there and do something a little bit different with how that ends up going on. So I get where Big 12 fans coming from and saying it's cute you're even talking about the Big 12 bracket. Well, kind of have to. That's about the only thing that is reasonably out there to talk about right now. And number one, it's more so based off of the Big 12 tournament is fun. And just like anything, it's more fun the longer that K-State's able to play in it. So I would, it's at least a consolation that if you have to play in the toughest part of it, you play Colorado day 1, and you should probably easily advance and guarantee yourself a second day. But look, if Coleman Hawkins comes back, I don't think it would be at 100% health, obviously. But we saw when he was here and he was healthy enough playing for this team, they won 6 straight games. They beat 4 teams in the top 25 during that stretch. He's a difference maker. He changes the way that they play. So that would just be the hope, even if ridiculous, and I think it is closer to ridiculous than reality, you would at least tell yourself, you saw this team beat 6 different Big 12 teams in a row, including Iowa State, Kansas, and Arizona. Why can't they go and do it against some of these other teams up in Kansas City? So we'll see how it goes, but it's worth monitoring because that's really all that's left for you this year. Big 12 fan also said Coleman shouldn't play in Kansas City. Hang it up, fella, and get ready to learn to speak Croatian. Coleman's going to be able to play at least somewhere a little better than Croatia, I would imagine. But look, that's the perfect kind of example, though. A lot of these guys playing Division I college basketball in the Big 12 is the best level of basketball they'll ever get to experience. A lot of these guys are not ever going to play in the NBA, and playing professional basketball anywhere else is impossibly, like, it cannot live up to what it would be playing in the Big 12. So, go soak it up. You don't want to go out like with a whimper. And I would imagine that Coleman Hawkins is a guy that probably feels a lot of pressure to go out there and play. And he's a very aware person. So he definitely knows that he's let people down this year, and he just didn't live up to what his billing was. And so I think that he would like to go out and go down swinging, at least for K-State. And again, this is one of those where we look at what he's said and done over really since conference play began. He's given his best, and he's given a lot for K-State. So people should respect him and reward him for that.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's been fine, and I think he's probably been battling that injury most of the season as well. I mean, at least part of the Big 12 season. So unfortunate that he got hurt and couldn't play these games. I think K-State probably has a much better chance to win at least a couple of those with him healthy. But you can't change what you can't change. You just got to move forward.
Yep, and obviously a lot of that can change with what's left to be played this coming week because obviously K-State has tough situations. They have to go at Cincinnati and then home against Iowa State, who I'm sure will be out for revenge. So it could all work out in a much different way where K-State is bumped back down to that bottom level, or they're pushed up and around. I think, though, you would like for K-State to at least sneak a win somewhere else in the process to make sure that they're not in that 12-13 game, because then that puts you in a really impossible spot, because BYU's playing like probably one of the 4 best teams in the league at this current point. So you're going to want to try and make sure that you keep your standing and maybe don't play them, because those other 3, that you can get BYU, but I think they might be playing the toughest at this point in time. Crowd-wise, Kansas would be tough up there, but there's no reason to go into great detail on that stuff at this point right now. So that's about all that we have for today. Again, nothing to really talk about from the game against Colorado. K-State wins 65-56. Fan, do the Cats get a win in Cincinnati?
I think it'll be tough, especially if Coleman Hawkins isn't available. Since they've played decent at home, they still are kind of in the bubble picture a little bit, even though they don't have very many good wins. But they're 17-12, and they still think they have a chance at the tournament. I think they'll play pretty hard. I think it's going to be tough, unless my caveat would be if they get good Doug back. If Doug is efficient and making 2s and 3s, that's really the biggest shot I think they have. Plus Max Jones playing well. I think they've got to get at least 2 of their 3 guards playing at an elite level to go win that game, plus David Gasson doing his thing. So that's what it's going to take, and I don't have a lot of confidence that's going to happen.
Well, there was a little guard last year that tried to will them to a win in Cincinnati, and they still lost. So, it could all go right in a lot of ways and still not be enough. It'll be a tough place for them, especially like you're talking. Cincinnati still has at least a little bit of belief left in there. So that will do it for us today. For KSU Fan, I'm Mason Voth. Drew and I will be back with a full KSO show tomorrow talking football. We will go over some of the production that K-State had at the NFL Combine, and then discuss a few more topics pertaining to the current Cats that are getting closer and closer to getting on the football field against Iowa State over in the Aer Lingus College Football Classic. Don't worry, people. I don't have a read to give you for that on cats2ireland.com, because you probably missed your window to buy your tickets. All of a sudden, single game tickets, they ended on February 28th, and I don't have reads for the month of March. So I'm sparing you all that today. But the second they come back, I am telling you all about what you need to know over in Ireland. And we're still going to get a fun fact out of Drew tomorrow about the country that we will all, or hopefully, be visiting towards the end of August. So we're out of here. Thanks for watching. Go to KStateOnline.com to get full post-game coverage from the Cats' victory over Colorado. Probably more of what you're looking for, recruiting updates on a couple of visitors in town for basketball today, and then plenty of football coverage to get you through the offseason.